And so you said T case speciesism.
Yep. First, on the extra-topicality argument, you have not read an interpretation, which means you don't end up getting any of the violation. First, the U.S. is the people, Bennett 13, the U.S. is the people, not the government, and legalization is the removing of legal prohibition against something which is currently illegal. Rules 9, legalization is the process of removing legal prohibition. Legalization describes a different legal status rather than legal regulation. We meet our counter-interpretation. The affirmative makes the claim that marijuana should no longer be prohibited, but uses the embracement as a method for us to be able to legalize through affinity groups. Outcome is the same. You still get all the arguments, just not based on regulation and no uniqueness for your critical argument. We still allow for critical discussion about marijuana policy in the process of the act. We simply don't defend the USFG action, and extra T is not a voter. You get to attack other methods means we increase ground. We still talk about the implementation. You get all core net ground proves no abuse and no abuse in this speech. Solvency is still predicated off the legalization. That's the Melisa and Derrida evidence in the 1EC, which specifically contextualizes why the attack of marijuana prohibition is key for us to end up solving in the first place. And the app still is a method of implementation. It's just fiat. Everything has gone to action. The app is still to legalize, and we isolate affinity groups is the best way to be able to solve for this. And the only way to mobilize is through the embracement of anxiety. Still gets links to the outcome of the plan. It means you can still read arguments such as the treaty decided the decrim counterplay. Now onto the case debate. First is their argument. The first argument they end up making here is that neoliberalism is expanded through the legalization of marijuana. This again assumes a regulatory framework which the affirmative does not do. 1EC cross-sex is pretty clear on this. You should read a better link argument here. Also, the affirmative ends up solving back for this. The IPC evidence is very good about how anxiety ends up structuring the way these systems work in the first place. So if the affirmative wins, then we end up solving for anxiety through affinity groups, then we end up winning this argument. Now their next argument is we don't specify what legalization ends up being. I think the 1EC cross-sex again was pretty good on this. Their next argument is that we create a more racist regulation system. This cross-apply the T debate here. We do not increase regulations. Also, we end up tracking back to this because the regulatory regime of the status quo is challenged by the affirmative because we end up attacking the way latent anxieties create this sort of racist violence in the first place. It means that the affirmative is necessary to solve for this violence. Now their next argument is that the war on drug gets a new lease on life because of the affirmative. The app solves this because it's based on anxiety. The IPC evidence says that revealing the public secret is key to end up solving this. Means that the affinity groups that are formulated around this are key to end up tagging structural challenges against us in the first place. Now, the Melisa evidence also gives us a spillover argument, which means that we're able to actually end up able to do this. The counter-hegemonic knowledge allows for us to spill over to other movements, which means that these sorts of criminal activities also wouldn't be criminalized post-affirmative. Now, their next argument is about power inevitable and good. This Dickinson evidence is misinterpreting Foucault. Yes, power is inevitable. It is a question of the structures which orient that power. I think the affirmative does a really good job of explaining why the capitalist system of anxiety specifically orients biopolitics in a negative way as it paints bodies and through anxiety as a way to create tension between them, which causes this violence in the first place. Means that the affirmative simply has to prove that this is a bad instance of biopolitics who end up winning our argument here, even if it's good in some forms. Doesn't mean it isn't. It doesn't mean that the affirmative is wrong. Also, they say that we prevent broader reform. The affinity group arguments ends up solving for this because we have identified capitalism as the root cause for the way these structures end up working in the first place. We are able to mobilize movements to actually be able to remedy the way that capitalism has made these structures in the first place. Now, their next argument is that legalization doesn't solve. The IPC argument is critical to this. It talks about criminal activity is what allows in the status quo for this regulatory regime to create this sort of violence. It means that the affirmative's attack against it is necessary to do it in the first place. I'm going to also extend the Derrida evidence here at the bottom. They have not contested that the experience of marijuana is necessary to reappropriate itself. Means that legalization is core to contextualizing this. Also extend the violence impact here. They have dropped the root cause claim that the capitalist affect anxiety is what creates all violence in the status quo. Means that we outweigh on structural violence. Now, the K-proper permutation do have no reason why the alt and the abstract conscious raising is necessary and incompatible in the attempt to escape from anthropocentrism itself. Anthropocentric and firmly cemented in egotistical humanism. They try to pose this and could include otherness as a non-selfless destroys the bottomless intimacy of inner experience more than 10. The deep implication is that the view is anthropocentric. They hear that we run into one of the greatest obstacles at the end of the ecological thought of science, saying no anthropocentrism is at the end of the dangerous political and philosophical thinking of the right that we can say no side humanist reality. The idea is that self-humanism anthropocentric assumes an anthrop that is centered. The idea of anthropocentrism is that the human occupies the privileged non-place. One accuses others of anthropocentrism from that place, a position of hunting into anthropocentrism as anthropocentrism. We can, in good faith, cancel the difference between humans and non-humans, or can we pursue putting strange strangers in damages of the guy box, the web of life box, and the more than human world of box. All sentient beings are really just humans box. The sentient beings are neither human nor non-human box. The idea is like merely upgrade the self. The phrase I am me shows how it's literally the so-called self is as believing in the inevitable nature of self is wrong, but so claiming that there is a thrilling, infinitely plastic posting out there waiting is to be completely manipulated. And also capitalism is the root cause of the oppression of animals. Like economic domination controls everything. Number two, the ideological entanglements between exploitation of animals and other animals are fueled by economic-based oppression, particularly capitalism, the liberation of the animals is unlikely in a world that is increasingly uses both as a fiber, the continual growth and expansion of transnational corporations. They, the bodies of other animals increasingly are used to provide privilege for the affluent. The same practices that cause enormous suffering for other animals also takes a terrible toll on the workers of the third world, the global environment, and consumers. And the consumptive mindset is the root cause of the oppression of non-human life. Very 10. The non-human world provides other living context of existence. These ecosystem organisms, their ecological processes, patterns combine to create a living, self-regulated organism whose right to exist in the independent of human notions of value, birds, plants, trees, otherwise live and lands and other ecosystems of intrinsic value and right to exist and independent of human needs and wants. The disease that permeates the human condition is the condition of human guidance of mere resources and rather than being conscious ecosystems that make all life possible. And even if we lose the root cause of it, you still vote on the permutation. The act isolated as a social structure which allows for violence to happen in the status quo. Only a risk that we make things better by changing it through the affirmative. The act is also key to counter-hegemonic, key to this bill of counter-hegemonic discourse to work in the first place. That's the least evidence that isolates marijuana is the weak point that we need to break down before we are able to actually address other counter-hegemonic movements. Also, the animal rights movement is too fractured to challenge capitalism. That's 06, liberalism, and the movement comes across clash under religion, age, and politics. As such, diversity is both virtue and vice. There is nevertheless the lack of philosophical, political coherence, splintering the movement into competing and conflicting fragments. Reform is a single issue oriented. The AAM lacks a systematic social critique that grasps capital logic as a key to determining the force of animal exploitation, recognizes the state of the corporate dominated structure, resistant to the significant and social change. Also, the lack of autonomy. What does it mean to actually embrace this sort of thing? What does it actually end up ever leading to the movement? The affirmative is key to actually be able to create these movements in the first place. The affinity group's argument is not accessed by the alternative means that the affinity groups is a specific insight of the alternative because they never are able to actually mobilize against the state function means that the affirmative is necessary to actually create this in the first place. Now I'm going to answer a few of the link arguments here. First is their notion of biopolitics. The affirmative's notion of biopolitics is structured by capitalist affect and anxiety means they don't have a link to the specific structure that we end up interrogating into the wind that we have an external impact through the capitalist anxiety causing the linchpin of violence in the first place means that the affirmative is necessary. Can you give me a few more cards, Jaxie? Also, they don't have a specific. They also don't have a specific link to our advocacy statements such as legalization of marijuana being problematic and recreating species. It means that the affirmative is still net better. It means you're always going to vote on the permutation. Also, you can simply vote on the permutation perm to the affirmative and reject speciesism. I think it's a logical step that is able to do it in line with the affirmative. Okay. They also don't have a specific argument to the mechanism of consciousness raising that the affirmative actually ends up creating means that the affirmative's form of consciousness raising is probably a productive thing, or it's no different than the alternative in the first place. Means that permutation to the affirmative is also sufficient to end up being able to solve because the consciousness raising might end up leading to the very alternative they're talking about. No. You got a minute. The alternative also doesn't really come to terms with the way capitalist affect and anxiety works in the first place, means that it doesn't ever actually solve for capitalism because it assumes it is this like monolithic just creation of capital rather than understanding the way it's co-opted the affect of anxiety in the first place to create tensions between bodies. That's not just human bodies, but like bodies in general, which means that the affirmative is a necessary starting point to be able to understand the way violence has manifested itself due to like stigmatization or criminalization of activities and being able to spill over to broader structures to actually be able to solve for like violence in the meta sense. All we have to win is that the affirmative is a necessary first step to being able to solve in the first place. I'll just read it in the secondary process. Yeah. All right. You want to read this? What is it? Alternatives to anthropocentric are misanthropic and they can solve natural destruction and still to human nature dichotomy. Peterson 06. The approach that prioritizes myobiotic community leads to a picture of communities not as vital but rather as detrimental to the protection of the environment. Take precedence biocentric stance as see the responsibilities protecting the ecosystem for people to misanthropic organization sharpen the dichotomy of human versus environment.
Can you send it out before?
Yeah. Where did you mark it? Human environment. And environment. Environment and human and environment. I don't see that. Oh, human versus environment. Or not and.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Alright, so. It's,
Oh, yeah, sorry. Ready, go ahead. Okay. So this piece of Berry evidence that you read talks about how consumption is the root cause, like, I guess, of like capitalism. I'm curious, in a world of when you are legalizing marijuana, which our Calhoun evidence indicates will lead to an increase of consumption of marijuana, how are you able to gain access to
Your Calhoun evidence also assumes a regulatory regime that the affirmative doesn't create.
Sure, but if
There's
people
no
who had-
incentive
If
post-affirmative.
people had more
for
access to
legal
marijuana, it just makes more sense that they consume it more often because there's no legal barriers stopping them,
Alright.
especially in a world with like no regulations whatsoever.
Well, the affirmative also argues that the experience of marijuana is necessarily beneficial, so I don't think it's a disad that people smoke marijuana. But I do
I
think the
understand you don't
affirmative
think it's a
challenges the
dissad that
neoliberal
people-
structures
yeah.
which the Calhoun evidence
That's
is
fine, I
talking
think
about.
it's fine that you think they like continue consuming. I'm just curious as to how you have an internal link to this Berry evidence when you increase that level of consumption that occurs.
The Berry evidence is also in the context of specifically like the way capitalism produces consumption. We critique that capitalist mindset in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So like people may consume more marijuana or smoke marijuana, but that
Okay.
is distinct from
What
like, the
about
way
the app?
neoliberalism.
Sure, what about the app changes the way that like big marijuana corporations would work, or just like cartels in general,
Well,
if they're not like
okay,
related
so
to the state or functional
That's
within
the
state?
affinity groups arguments that talk about how when we've used this form of consciousness raising and revealed the public secret of anxiety specifically around marijuana, they're always at the ready to be able to like push back against like certain state policies or governments because they understand the way that like capitalism is
Which piece of evidence do
manifested
you think
itself.
says this?
The IPC 14 evidence, the
Because
very
the
last
I
one.
controlled F your entire 1AC, and the only piece of evidence that talks about marijuana is, Malaysia evidence, nothing else mentions marijuana.
Yeah, the Melisa evidence is our internal link to being able to spill over, but the IPC evidence talks about like the mobilization of population.
This piece of
Melisa
evidence-
evidence talks about
Yeah,
like
but it's like,
prohibition
this
being a
piece of
specific
evidence
part.
is just like a prohibition exists in marijuana, which the state can use to control other, like individuals. Where do you think it makes a spillover claim?
Probably like halfway through the card, it uses the
just
terminology
maybe
marijuana science is like is a point
a
of
specific point of vulnerability.
yeah.
Is a specific point of vulnerability. Why would that, even if it's a specific point of vulnerability, like it's this humongous biopolitical, like.
Because that's what's
individual,
necessary
why
for the
would that-
spillover is to find the proper place to end up attacking these sorts of systems, and then the IPC evidence adds to the context that attacking these points of vulnerability is necessary to be able to dismantle it in the first place.
Okay. The piece of Niebuhr evidence we talks about how essentially why we imprison animals is because we use them as fodder for growth and expansion. But how could, in a world like our Romney evidence talks about how originally we killed animals because we saw them as beneficial, and then we started capturing them as a result. Like, I'm curious as to where, did we first start capturing animals and realize they could be useful to us, or did we just like always think they could
That's
be
why like we
useful?
also make the argument is even if we lose the root cause debate, you can still vote on the permutation because the app is like a step in the right direction, understanding the way these structures are intertwined through like capitalism and the
I
modern
think it's
system.
also like a chicken before the egg is not right, is not the correct way to view it. Our argument is that capitalism affects the way in which that sort of control works in the status quo.